The courtroom was utterly silent. The words hung in the high-ceilinged courtroom like a drumbeat, causing all to come to a standstill. Cameras clicked, microphones inclined, and reporters wrote furiously. This was no ordinary trial. It was the day Kody Brown, head of the infamous Brown family, would answer questions that had plagued tabloids and enthusiasts for months. Kody occupied the defendant's chair, wearing a sharp suit, but the nervousness was impossible to conceal. Used to being confident and calm, he now appeared on edge, repeatedly looking at his wives who sat behind him. Robin, Christine, Mary, and Janelle sat collectively, each showing a combination of worry, frustration, and incredulity. The court had never witnessed such a family saga in the legal arena before, and all present could sense the tension in the atmosphere. Months of rumors and speculation had culminated in this. Rumors of family conflict, money disputes, and betrayal had been floating on the internet for years. Some were false, some were outrageous, but the plaintiff, a former family member, was hell-bent on bringing it all into the light. Accusations ranged from money manipulation to emotional manipulation, and the Browns' private lives were now being picked apart for everyone to examine. The judge came in, robes billowing, and the room fell silent. Order in the court. The gavel crashed, stifling the murmur. It was not a trial. It was a spectacle. A collision between family secrets and public responsibility. Kody's defense lawyer, an old pro, leaned forward and whispered plans. But Kody hardly listened. His head was spinning, wondering how this might affect not only him, but his family. Behind him, Christine's eyes were filled with rage. Robin's mouth pursed, and Mary looked distracted. The wives understood that each of them might blow something on the stand. Each statement could alter the family dynamic forever. The prosecutor rose, looming over the defendant's table. In his pocket was a thick file packed with papers, emails, bank records, and financial reports that purportedly proved Kody made choices that hurt not only outsiders, but also members of his own household. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, his voice firm and authoritative, "today you will hear not only a trial, but the unraveling of decades of secrets. You will witness things that impacted lives, relationships, and trust within one of the most examined families in America." The courtroom gasped in unison. This was more than legal proceedings. It was family soap operas played out on television and audience members' front row seats. Robin squirmed in her seat, holding her husband's hand. Christine poised forward, her eyebrows tightening like she was trying to read minds and guess what would be uncovered. Each wife had her own opinion, her own feelings, and her own investment in the events that were unfolding. The prosecutor opened the folder to show a chain of emails between Kody and some family members. Some messages seemed innocuous, on the face of it, but closer inspection implied manipulation and control over choices that influenced the wives' finances and living situations. The jury wrote furious notes. The audience murmured, and Kody's stomach dropped. Next was the envelope holding video proof. The room leaned in as a whole as it was played on the screen. Private discussions were uncovered, some with Kody and his wives, others with outside partners, of moments of tension, secret motives, and choices that had been hidden from the public. Gasps erupted throughout the room. Even the judge stopped, raised an eyebrow in shock. Kody shifted uneasily, feeling the burden of attention. Robin's hand shook a little as she clung to his, while Christine folded her arms, anger and resignation etched on her face. The courtroom was not only observing legal testimony, it was seeing the Browns' domestic life exposed. Each look, each sigh, each response became part of the narrative. Outside, news channels were live. Supporters argued online, defending Kody as a father attempting to do the best he could, while others were denouncing him for supposed manipulations. The social media fray was reflected in the tension within, but within the courtroom, the stakes were actual, palpable, and urgent. The judge summoned the first witness, and everyone knew that the truth was finally going to be tested. The mood in the room was charged. No one would ever look at Kody, his wives, or their saga in the same way again. Each secret, each hidden fight, Each long-standing grudge was now out there for the world to see. And in that instant, it was clear the trial was not merely about Kody Brown. It was about the complex, complicated, and even hurtful dynamics between the family. The world watched, the family was laid bare, and the first act of this courtroom drama was just beginning. The courtroom had barely calmed after the dramatic first session, when the prosecutor stood again, his eyes flashing with determination. He grasped a fat, intimidating folder that seemed to throb with the promise of unseen facts. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every movement, every gesture. The crowd leaned forward. This was the moment that could make or break it. Kody Brown, the prosecutor started, voice firm but calm. Today your family and you will hear truths that no one can deny. These documents, emails, and recordings depict actions that had an impact not only on outsiders but on the very people sitting back there. His eyes went around Robin, Christine, Mary, and Janelle, and the room tingled with expectancy. He opened the folder to show emails that were exchanged over the course of many years. On the surface, there seemed to be some routine ones. Talk of family timetables, property settlements, and business issues. But when each message was read out, the room could sense the tension grip. Lurking in the words were tiny manipulations, suggestions of bias, and conclusions that put strain on the wives. Gasps rose from the crowd as onlookers saw this wasn't an ordinary money issue. It was a tale of trust, dominance, and emotional distress. Robin slumped forward in her chair, hands tightly clasped together, eyes glued to the screen. Christine's mouth was set in a hard line, a quiet fury simmering behind her calm facade. Mary fidgeted uncomfortably, darting glances toward Kody, her expression conflicted between pain and confusion. Janelle sat motionless, hearing every word, the burden of the revelations bearing down upon her. And then came the bombshell, a modest, plain envelope. The prosecutor displayed it for everyone to see. And this, he declared, is proof that transcends written words. This video records intimate conversations and moments and the full extent of the decisions and actions taken by this family. The envelope was gingerly delivered to a technician, who erected a screen at the front of the courtroom. The lights were lowered, and the video was played. Gasps swept through the room, as the crowd witnessed intimate conversations between Kody and his wives. There were heated arguments over money matters, disagreements about where to live, and conversations that showed favoritism some wives felt over others. One of the clips featured Kody making plans with one wife without informing the others. Another featured a scene in which a financial decision was made that put great pressure on the resources of the family. The tone was even on the tape, but the underlying tension was charged. A family split apart by secrets, manipulation, and unspoken anger. The jury leaned forward, taking furious notes. Every piece of evidence deepened the unfolding drama, illustrating how domestic family squabbles had escalated into public arguments. The courtroom was no longer merely a venue for legal rulings. It had become a stage upon which emotions, loyalty, and betrayal clashed in real time. Kody's face stayed mostly serene, but the strain in his shoulders gave him away. He looked at Robin, who gave a brief, reassuring squeeze of the hand before releasing it. Christine's eyes stayed glued to the screen, her face a blend of incredulity and outrage. Mary clamped down on her lip, fighting tears, and Janelle let out a slow breath, preparing herself for what was next. The prosecutor froze the tape, allowing the magnitude of what was just seen to sink in. These are not one-time things, he told them. These are patterns, sequelae of repeated behavior that have resulted in emotional distress, mistrust, and fragmentation in this family. His statement echoed throughout the courtroom, each listener sensing the seriousness of the charges. Next were the final puzzle pieces, financial records. The reports indicated transactions, investments, and choices not disclosed openly with the wives. There were questions regarding preferential treatment, distribution of resources, and if choices were taken with certain wives in mind over others. The proof indicated a household torn between loyalty, trust, and individual interests, all under scrutiny. The prosecutor addressed the jury, eyes burning. You are not only judging financial behavior or legal violations, he asserted. You are judging relationships, integrity, and accountability. You are considering the actions of a family patriarch whose choices have impacted every member of his family. Robin's grip on Kody's hand tightened. Christine's eyes glistened with frustration and sadness. Mary's face flushed as memories and emotions bubbled up. Janelle simply stared, taking in each piece of evidence with quiet resolve. The courtroom was a mix of empathy, shock, and judgment. The audience outside the family gallery could hardly contain their curiosity, and social media exploded with live reactions. Kody Brown Court, Sister Wives Drama, Family Secrets. Exposed, the initial session had primed, but this second session showed the depth of the secret drama. It was no longer guesswork. It was reality. Hirio's emails and bank statements painted a picture of a family struggling with deep emotional and financial dilemmas. Trust stretched to its limit and secrets ready to explode and destroy everything. Before the session ended, the courtroom was filled with unanswered questions. How much did Kody know? How accountable was he for the disagreements among the wives? Most importantly, what would the jury conclude when confronted with the burden of these disclosures? Outside the courtroom, pundits speculated, fans vented online, and the family's public reputation hung in the balance. But in the courtroom, the stakes were intensely personal. This was all about Kody and his wives, their relationships, their loyalty, their trust, and the repercussions of secrets kept behind closed doors. The judge ordered a brief recess, and as the families were led out of the room, whispers abounded. All knew that the next hearing would go even deeper, with witnesses prepared to tell firsthand the emotional and relational effects of these secret actions. The tale was far from complete, and the world was enthralled, following every revelation. The courtroom settled after the startling revelations of the cryptic evidence, but a thick tension hung in the air. Everyone in the room sensed it, the silent heaviness of what lay ahead. Today it would not be emails, videos, or documents alone. Today it would be voices, feelings, and naked truths exposed to all. Witnesses were summoned, and with each move towards the stand, the air became charged. The first witness was an old friend of the Brown family, a person who had worked with Kody and his wives for years. Their voice shook a little at first, but each statement landed on the jury with irrefutable impact. I trusted him, the witness explained. Speaking of Kody, I thought I knew him, but over the years, I realized there were decisions being made behind closed doors. Decisions that affected not just business, but lives, including those of his wives. The court gasped. The press wrote down every word. Kody fidgeted in his seat. Robin put her hand over his and squeezed softly, a silent show of solidarity, although her own heart pounded. Christine's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing the witness intently, attempting to evaluate each statement. Mary cast her eyes downward, her nervous fingers ringing together. Janelle appeared serene on the surface, yet her eyes hid a tempest of feelings. Then came the testimony of the wives. It was an unusual and intimate occasion. Robin was summoned first. She testified in hushed tones, describing times that she felt she was left out of important decisions. There were times when I felt like my opinion didn't count, she said, on the verge of being overcome by her emotions. I believed Kody would be just to treat all of us equally, but at times I felt I was invisible when decisions were made that impacted our lives. The jury listened carefully, making notes as Robin spoke, showing the people behind the accusations. The crowd leaned forward, transfixed by the raw emotion in her voice. Cameras from the media zoomed in, recording every detail of what she said. Christine stood next. Her attitude was more pointed, more adversarial. I've loved this family for years, she declared, her voice firm but calm. Love doesn't absolve manipulation. There were decisions made in a lack of transparency, and it hurt not me alone. All of us. We are a family, and yet we were often pitted against ourselves. Mary's account was more emotional. Tears pricked at her eyes as she remembered times of exclusion and misunderstanding. I've tried to be patient, to understand, To forgive, she confessed, her voice shaking. But it's difficult when you feel you're always left in the dark. Life-affecting decisions shouldn't be kept secret. We should be partners, not spectators. Janelle's testimony was imparted in a soft, measured hurt. She described her attempts to keep the peace, and still feel the pinch of behind-the-scenes decisions and favoritism. I've always had faith in this family, she spoke softly. But love cannot oblige accountability. We must have honesty, transparency, and respect. That is what this trial is all about, for all of us. During the session, Kody was generally calm, but tension showed in his jaw and the slight clenching of his fists. He looked at each wife as she testified, her words piercing deeper than any paper could. Each witness was a mirror, reflecting decisions, errors, and outcomes that he couldn't conceal. The prosecutor leveraged the emotional gravitas of the witness accounts. You understand, he said to the jury, that this is not about trivial disagreements or misunderstanding. These are human beings, human relationships, and real outcomes. Actions have consequential ripples, and today you are seeing them for yourselves. The courtroom was tense, as if it were all holding its breath. Onlookers were motionless, completely engaged by the dramatic emotionalism of the scene before them. The jurors were scribbling notes frantically, obviously moved by the intensity of feeling and depth of the family relationships. Kody's defense lawyer tried to step in, asking how emotional the testimony was. Feelings are running high, he replied. But we have to sort feelings from facts. But the prosecutor replied at once. Feelings are facts when they convey the actual effect of choices on actual lives. This is the human cost of deception and manipulation. As the session went on, the emotional intensity increased. Witnesses testified about disagreements in private, moments of favoritism, and choices that created tension between the wives. The media recorded each reaction, each tear, and every flash of rage. Social media hummed outside, as fans argued, who was right, who had been hurt the most. Could love withstand such a test? By the final session, it was apparent that the courtroom drama had reached a very personal place. The Brown family was no longer simply a reality TV phenomenon. They were flesh and blood human beings, under public scrutiny, with their emotions, choices, and relationships laid bare. The judge ordered a recess, giving the emotional tempest a chance to quiet. Kody and his wives sat together in silence, giving each other silent support. Robin squeezed his hand. Christine let out a frustrated sigh, releasing her anger. Mary wiped at her eyes, and Janelle nodded silently, preparing herself for what was to come. Everyone in the courtroom, and everyone sitting at home, knew one thing. The emotional testimony had shifted everything. Facts and papers were one thing, but to hear the voices of the people most impacted by the rulings brought a level of reality that no amount of evidence could quite reach. The Brown family's secrets, strife, and heartaches were no longer secret. They were public now, and their effects were impossible to deny. The session was over, but the drama was far from finished. The courtroom had seen the very first human layer of this drama, and the rest of the world waited with bated breath for the next session, where dramatic turns and surprises promised to shake the Brown family to its foundations again. The courtroom was still abuzz from the unadulterated emotional accounts of the wives, when suddenly the defense attorney stood up, announcing a turn in the tale. For hours the prosecution had controlled with facts and emotional anecdotes, weaving a tale of manipulation and stealth. But now, the atmosphere was charged differently. Everybody knew that the following seconds could entirely change the direction of the trial. Your Honor, the defense attorney began, voice firm and deliberate. We have new evidence that may change the understanding of the events being presented. Evidence that challenges key assumptions and offers a perspective that has not yet been considered. Kody Brown sat up straighter, a flicker of cautious hope in his eyes. His wives glanced at one another. Robin's eyes widened slightly. Christine's jaw tightened. Mary's hands clutched the edge of the seat, and Janelle's face remained calm but alert. They all understood that this twist could either save the family's reputation or plunge them deeper into controversy. The courtroom hung in suspenseful silence as a fresh batch of documents was presented. These were communications, receipts, and recorded messages that were not previously shown. On the surface, they looked ordinary. But as they were scrutinized methodically, another story unraveled. The defense maintained that some of the decisions labeled as favoritism were based on miscommunications or misunderstandings, and that Kody had in certain situations acted with the intention to safeguard and equilibrium the complex dynamics of the family. A general murmur went around the room. The jurors' faces changed from shock to intrigue, and the prosecution's smugness faltered for the first time. Was it possible that some of the charges were overblown, or even misrepresented? Then arrived the actual bombshell. A surprise witness. The doors to the courtroom swung open, and someone walked towards the stand. A close family friend who knew the ins and outs of the Brown home. The judge gave a nod, and the witness began to speak. All eyes in the room were on them, aware that their words could turn everything around. The witness started slowly, gradually telling of times of support, compromise, and behind-the-scenes sacrifices. They told of instances where Kody had done things not out of favoritism but necessity, attempting to balance the intricate web of a large and unusual family. They elaborated on financial choices that had once seemed secretive but were really calculated moves made to bring about fairness in the end. Gasp filled the room as some of the allegations were inconsistent with previous testimony. Robin sat back, taking in the new viewpoint, and Christine's eyes furrowed, attempting to reconcile this with what she had seen herself. Mary was uncertain, swinging between anger and potential understanding. Janelle's calm demeanor now appeared to be quiet calculation, balancing each word with precision. The prosecution quickly responded with a challenge to the witness's credibility. Your Honor, although this testimony sounds agreeable, it goes against set evidence and accounts of those closely involved, the prosecutor contended. But the witness remained unruffled, producing evidence, emails, dated records, and documents pertaining to money that supported their version of events. The courtroom atmosphere became charged. All present could sense the tension escalate as the dynamic of the trial changed. Kody slowly exhaled, a trace of relief blanketing him. For the first time, there was glimmer of hope that the jury would be able to see his side. However, he realized that the process was still far from done. Each revelation now had layers. Each twist required deliberate thought. The wives, too, were navigating a storm of conflicting emotions. Robin's hand found Kody's, gripping it tightly as a silent reassurance. Christine's gaze remained fixed on the witness, her mind racing through past events. Mary's eyes glistened with tears, caught between vindication and lingering hurt. Janelle simply nodded, absorbing every detail and preparing for the next move. The surprising turn of events didn't simply undermine the prosecution, it undermined the narrative. It compelled everyone present, even the audience, to doubt their assumptions. Was Kody Brown actually manipulating his family, or were the behaviors exhibited previously a part of a more complex, misunderstood dynamic? The judge asked for a brief recess so that all could digest the latest news. In whispers, witnesses speculated, reporters argued on the air, and social media went wild with hashtags #KodyBrownTwist, #SisterWivesCourt, and #FamilyDrama unfolds. People outside the courtroom debated hotly about loyalty, duty, and justice. In private, Kody and his wives spoke in hushed tones. Robin whispered, "We have to stay united." Christine cut in briefly, "We have to see how the jury responds. They're the ones who make all the decisions." Mary murmured, "I just want the truth to be revealed." Janelle's calm voice cut through the tension. "We can't make them decide. We can only share our story." As the session concluded, it was obvious that the trial had ventured into unknown territory. The dramatic turn of events had rewritten the script, weaving emotions, facts, and personal accounts into a rich brocade of reality and perception. No one could guess the verdict now. The jury's verdict would not be based on mere facts, but on comprehending the delicate dynamics of a family living in extreme public glare. The session ended in an air of suspense that hung over the courtroom like a cloud of thunder. Everyone understood that the final session, the final judgment, would be definitive, not only legally, but emotionally. Kody Brown and his wives had weathered a storm of revelations, but whether they would ultimately prevail was yet to be determined. The courtroom was electric with tension. Following days of incendiary testimonies, incriminating evidence, and a surprise twist that threatened to upend the story, The time for which everyone had been waiting had finally come. The verdict. The jury entered the room again, carrying papers. All the individuals present, including the judge and the witnesses, felt the atmosphere charged with expectation. Kody Brown sat at the defense table, back stiff, eyes on the jury. Robin, Christine, Mary, and Janelle sat behind him, their faces a combination of hope, fear, and anxiety. This was the end of a saga that had been months, even years in the making. The ruling would not only affect the law, it would resonate through their family, their relationships, and the very image of their existence in public perception. The judge rapped the gavel. Will the foreperson please read the verdict? The room grew silent, each heartbeat sounding like a reverberation in the high-ceilinged courtroom. Cameras were trained on the jury foreperson, who cleared his throat and started speaking. After careful consideration of the evidence, the testimonies and the facts presented before this court, the foreperson said, pausing as if feeling the weight of every word, "We, the jury, have reached a unanimous decision." A collective gasp rippled through the spectators. Kody's heart pounded. Robin squeezed his hand tightly. Christine's arms crossed, her jaw tight. Mary's eyes filled with tears, while Janelle remained eerily calm, absorbing every detail. The jury concludes. The foreperson went on, that although there were choices made by the defendant that created emotional tension and disharmony in the family, these choices were not taken maliciously. The court does see the necessity, however, of openness, communication, and responsibility in family affairs of this type. The defendant is thus cautioned to take remedial measures and engage in mediation to provide fair treatment and honest communication between all parties involved. The room was filled with a combination of responses. Some viewers released breaths in relief. Others shook their heads in shock. The media frantically tried to read the meaning of the verdict, arguing whether it was a victory, a compromise, or a warning. Social media blew up with hashtags such as #KodyBrownVerdict, #SisterWivesCourt, and #FamilyJustice. Kody relaxed, breathing slowly. Relief washed over him, but it was moderated by knowing that this was not the end. There were things to be learned, bridges to mend, and a family to rebuild. He spoke to his wives. Robin smiled calmly at him, her hand still gripping his tightly. Christine appeared torn but nodded, recognizing that although the journey had been difficult, clarity had been found. Mary brushed away tears, experiencing a mix of relief and residual pain. Janelle just breathed, her composed nature hinting at a willingness to start anew and mend. The judge spoke to the courtroom, stressing the need for compassion, compromise, and the humanity of the case. This verdict is not purely about law, it is about relationships, trust, and the result of decisions, he stated. May this family be able to move forward in a spirit that encourages openness, respect, and understanding. For the audience, this moment was a mixture of catharsis and tension. Months of speculation, countless debates, and endless rumors had culminated in a resolution that was both nuanced and human. The trial had exposed private struggles, emotional conflicts, and the complexities of a family navigating unique circumstances under extreme public scrutiny. Beyond the courtroom, journalists documented reactions, live streams crowded social media, and supporters argued late into the night. Was justice achieved? Was the Brown family more united or more fractured than ever before? How would this verdict affect their lives going forward? Within, Kody and his wives gathered quietly. Robin whispered, "We weathered this together." Christine, who was still sorting through her own emotions, finally said, "It's time to rebuild." Cautiously, Mary added softly, "We require honesty always." Janelle concluded, "And we have to stick together. Regardless." The session closed with a deep feeling of closure, yet the concession that healing and trust would take time, work, and courage. The drama in the courtroom had uncovered secrets, ignited emotions, and reframed the story of one of America's most watched polygamist families. To the audience, it was more than a legal proceeding. It was one of family, love, betrayal, and redemption. The Brown family had weathered the storm, battled their secrets, and came out with lessons that would ring true far beyond the walls of the courtroom. As the courtroom cleared, the gravity of the trial remained, but so did hope. Hope that families could be healed, trust rebuilt, and the family fortified by the same trials that had come near to destroying them. The decision was final. But the Browns' story, their lives, their decisions, and their quirky family unit went on. Now under public scrutiny, but with a deeper sense of accountability and understanding.